We are live, we are live, we are live. All right, you don't have to do the dance, Karen. It's okay. So hello, everybody. Welcome to another amazing episode of The Full Set. We have a jam-packed session, and I, Dee Delgado, was running on CP time, but I want to explain to folks who may be joining us what CPT time, what colored person's time is. I feel like you're gonna turn up the volume. I feel like what happens during this time is that you got to turn down the volume if you're listening to the live or you're sharing it somewhere. You just got to turn down the volume. What was I gonna say? I feel like what happens during colored people's time is that time is a social construct, right? That's why we said we were going live at 7:30 and it is 7:55. So even though I said 7:40, I joined the call at 7:46. And then Karen was having issues. And so everybody was really sad. And it's okay. But it's an allotment of time because Black folks know that shit happens and ain't nothing we could do about it sometimes. White people, however, do get upset when you tell them that you're going to be late. I'm glad y'all didn't get upset that I'm late, but thank you. So how y'all doing tonight?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm okay. Thank you for asking. I appreciate it. Debbie, where are you right now?
Where am I right now? Cambridge, Massachusetts.
All right. And Karen, where are you right now?
San Francisco, California.
Wow. The time difference is amazing. And I'm in upstate New York. So let's get right into it. Your bios are in the top. So we're just going to talk about, I want to delve right into COVID-19. Karen, I know that you had discussed power, privilege, and the pandemic. You're going to have a series coming up. Do you want to share a little bit about what's going on with that?
Yeah, I just thought it was a really important time to bring people together to have that conversation, because I feel like we're getting little bits and pieces about how Black people, brown people are disproportionately dying and disproportionately working on the front lines, but we're not having a real conversation about privilege and how do we, those of us who have privilege, what do we do in this time period to push for equality and to be of assistance in our communities.
All right. And so what do you feel is the response of white folks during this pandemic? We know that the pandemic is disproportionately affecting Black and brown folks, primarily Black folks. You're getting the Surgeon General. Is the live on? Hold on one second. So the Surgeon General's warning, right? And also someone like Van Jones. I mean, although it's not really your lane to talk about those things, like what is the response of white folks?
Well, I think as with everything, there's a wide array of responses ranging from, I've basically moved my whole lifestyle to my vacation home and am ordering everything that I need off the internet and have basically recreated my entire lifestyle to I'm also on the front lines and being tremendously impacted and am losing people. So I think there's a gamut in there. I think among white folks who care about this definitely want to get involved, and there's lots of mutual aid efforts, fundraising efforts to buy masks or to buy stamps or to use social media to publicize what's going on.
Right.
So I can't really speak to one kind of response.
Okay, thank you. And Debbie?
Yeah, I think
there's some definite feedback. Is someone playing the video elsewhere? Like, is there another tab where Facebook is open for you?
No.
Or is someone playing it from their phone?
No, this is on my computer. Why is it doing that? Built-in microphone. Yeah, testing. How's that?
That's perfect.
Sounds better. Yeah, I would agree with Karen. Like I'm seeing everything, a full wide range. What I'm noticing is that whatever white people's racial lens was going into this is being amplified. So white people who do have some analysis do understand that, racial disparities are deeply entrenched in this white supremacist ideology and all the system design that's come out of that over the years, including redlining, and they can explain why Black and brown people disproportionately are living, in cramped and crowded spaces or on the front lines. Then there are people who have no analysis, and this is doubling down. They're wanting to blame people of color for this. And I think it's also reaffirming old ideas about biological difference. Like if you don't have an analysis, you look at the disproportionate rates of infection, hospitalization, and death for Black and brown folks. And, and the explanation is biological difference.
Right.
And so I just am more motivated than ever to do what I do. My piece of this is to educate white people, particularly white leadership. And I'm kind of starting to think ahead because I think we're headed towards another Great Depression.
Okay.
And coming out of the Great Depression, that's when a number of policies were created in the United States that like triple, quadruple down on racism. That's when redlining happened. That's when Social Security was given to white folks and not agricultural domestic workers. So I'm wanting to use the history post the Great Depression in the 20s to inform activism and policy coming out of this next depression.
Thank you for sharing that with me. Something I want to delve right into is the conversation. There are several conversations happening, right? Especially amongst white folks, right? The conversation about voting during the time of COVID, we're all talking about what this upcoming election season means. And when we talk about voting blue, no matter what, why are white people so fixated on that shit? I mean, I just don't understand. Like, it, historically speaking, like, is this the time right now to be concerned with, I mean, voting another rapist? It's just a nicer one into office right now. Debbie hates that question.
Well, it just froze. I missed the question that I hate.
I will not modify my statement. So when we're talking about voting blue, why are white people so concerned with voting blue, and why are white folks especially in such a rush to replace one rapist with another nicer one?
Oh, I don't hate that question.
Okay.
Do you want to take that question, Debbie, or you want me to go with it?
Why don't you go with it? I'm happy to chime in too.
Yeah. So I believe in diversity of tactics, and I understand why some people don't believe in the electoral process. And I also understand how the electoral process was intentionally created to make people want to disengage from it, ranging from the Electoral College and all the different voter suppression techniques that have only increased since the 2013 Supreme Court decision. So I understand why people don't want to participate in electoral politics, and I respect that point of view. To me, as an activist, it is extremely important to participate in electoral politics, and I encourage people to participate in it because I do think that we can have an impact. So for example, here in San Francisco, we just elected a very radical district attorney, and it's going to have a big impact on us as a city. As far as the presidential election, you know, I'm here in California, my vote doesn't really count. So I'm probably going to vote for my friend Mark Charles, who's running for president, and I highly encourage checking out his site, Mark Charles, Wireless Hogan. He has a great analysis on there. But I am going to encourage, as with 2016, the election is going to come down to those 7 or 8 states. You know, it'll come down to how people vote in Wisconsin, essentially. So I get that people don't want to participate. Wisconsin, right? But we have to remember that in 2016, part of the reason why people don't want to participate is that Trump lost by 2.8 million votes. The only reason why he's in office is because of 80,000 votes in 3 states. So I would say, you know, if you do live in those 3 states or in those 7 states, please do participate for the rest of us. And I hear you, Dee Dee. I mean, I cannot even tell you how disgusted I am that we started with this really diverse pool of candidates, highly qualified. I was myself a Julian Castro supporter, like very inspired, and then it's dwindled down to this. It makes me so angry. But I do think we have to get him out of office, and I do know it's a lesser of 2 evils, and I wish it were better, but I think it will make some difference. And that, especially when you think about now, a quarter of federal judges have been appointed by Trump. You have Mitch McConnell calling Republican federal judges who are nearing retirement age and asking them to retire now so he can replace them because they're afraid they're going to lose the Senate majority. And the impact that those judges will have, that's what keeps me up way at night. It's like a lifelong impact, not so much for me, I'm 51 years old, but for my kids and for younger people. It's a nightmare to have the federal judiciary composed of people who can't say if Brown versus Board of Education was decided correctly.
Right, because I'm thinking about how Debbie and I were talking about when we checked on last week, how Wisconsin has the sundown counties, you know, just full of Trump supporters. And so when you talk about, you know, that your vote doesn't matter because of the Electoral College and gerrymandering, like what is the white socialized mindset around voting choices? So I know you're saying that for you, voting is imperative, especially on the local level. But there are those of us, especially someone like me, who doesn't vote because, I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, like it actually doesn't. And so why are white folks jump down a lot of people's throats for not voting? And what is that about? Is that more racism? Like, why are y'all so attached to this?
For me, I'm not going to jump, again, diversity of tactics. Like, if you want to make social change in however way you want, I'm not going to judge you. If you don't want to participate electorally, or if you want to support a different candidate than I do, I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to unfriend you for that, right? But for me personally, I really hope that coming out of this, so in 2019, millennials surpassed boomers as the largest group in both the electorate and in the workforce. And I mean, boomers have screwed over millennials so many times, so hardcore, ranging from invading Iraq for no reason, the 2008 economic downturn caused by subprime mortgage lending to Black and Brown families. Then you graduate with all that college debt and into a terrible job market, and you're unable to buy a home because all the homes have been bought up by Jared Kushner and BlackRock and all of that. And then let's go back to like mass incarceration with Bill Clinton, blah, blah, blah. So basically, millennials have been screwed over by boomers so hardcore. And I pray that coming out of this, you say, you know what, step aside, y'all have to get out of here, and let's get millennials elected to Congress. Because you look at you know, Ayanna Pressley, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Joe Neguse. You know, you have some really incredible millennials who've run for office and who are doing a really good job. I think that the reason why people don't vote is because they don't feel like they have anyone to vote for. And I totally understand. Like, why would you go to choose between two people who don't inspire you and don't speak to you and don't represent you? It just seems like a big hassle. So I hope that millennials coming out of this are going to not only participate in elections, but they're going to run for office and replace this horrible leadership that has to go.
I want to take a comment from the comment section. Anna Smith said, evil is evil. There is no lesser. You still end up with evil. And so I pose this question to both of you. What does winning even mean at this point?
That's, you know, I was going to say, you know, boomers have screwed over and disappointed millennials. White people have screwed over and disappointed people of color since the beginning of time. So why would any person of color or people who care about, you know, that life, liberty, justice, that dream we hear about all the time, I just don't see any connection between who the federal government is and the kind of world I want to live in. So I'm disillusioned with what my vote means.
You're such a Cambridge person. I love it.
And yet, I also know that Black folks have lost their lives, and other people have lost their lives trying to get the right to vote. And so there is, I think, you know, it's a both and. Like, I can totally see why there's no motivation to vote for a system that doesn't give a shit about you. And I can see why fighting for the right to vote is an important thing to get. And I personally hope, I don't have, actually, hope is the wrong word. The idea that we cannot vote from home yet in the United States says everything to me about the intention of obstructing the right to vote. And I'm wondering if COVID will have any impact on that.
Karen, I want to ask you, thank you, Debbie. I want to ask you, what is white women's responsibility to Black women and non-men in the voting process?
Well, I mean, every right that white women have was won by Black women and non-men, you know, beyond the right to vote that white suffragettes push for. But I'm talking about all of our workplace protections, the protection from sexual harassment, Title IX, like you name it. We wouldn't have any of these things if it weren't for Black people. And so I strongly believe that when we enter that ballot box, we have a responsibility to represent and to vote for Black women. And I also put it, some people don't like to vote because they find it too complicated. Like here in California, we have initiative and referendum, and like literally the ballot is like this thick. And I'm a lawyer and I read these things and I can barely understand it. So I'm like, here's what you do. If the issues are complicated, vote the way Black women are voting, because the way Black women vote is good for everybody. So either vote for a Black woman or vote on the issues the same way Black women are voting. But I think we have a huge responsibility to, and the same in the workplace. So Black people earned all those rights for us in the workplace. Then we come in and suck them all up. And then we're like, oh, you know, work harder, pull your pants up, and maybe you can come here and work someday. I think the same way that we need to enter the ballot box, advocating on behalf of all marginalized people, we need to do the same in the workplace.
Samaria Graham says, you know, that you had said a little bit earlier that when we have a candidate or more Black folks and people of color need to run, Samaria Graham says when they run, they will need a serious support system. If you promote people running, you must support them, and it's exhausting. And I think of someone like Stacey Abrams, who was the incumbent favorite and then did not win. And so what a blow that must be to folks who already have to do so much labor. And, you know, I know a whole bunch of white people were supporting Stacey. And also it's like, I feel like the onus is on us to keep doing the work. And I want to just uplift Samaria's point because I do think it's important. I've gone to the Black Women in Congress had like a Higher Heights summit, and I went there, and it was amazing to see all these Black dope women of color just like in this room, taking up space, being unapologetic. And I felt the same way. It was like, well, run for office. And it's like, well, you know, I think about even the time, Debbie, that Nadine Mason was like, run for office, we'll back you. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. We need a lot of money. And plus I'm Black. Like, you know what I'm saying? So.
And to your point, Dee Dee, 75% of white women in Georgia voted for Brian Kemp.
I think, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Samaria Graham. Samaria Graham. Hi, Samaria. I love you. Thanks for being tuned in. I hope we have a phone call soon. I think there's also a really practical reason. Like there's this, yes, we white women owe Black and brown women for all these rights that have been fought for us. There's also this practical thing. They know what's what. They know how to organize.
Oh, Debbie, you're frozen.
Was that was part of the full set, wasn't it?
Oh, we just freeze you? Yeah. Yes,
Oh,
we do that.
Did you hear what I said?
No, can you repeat it?
So, last night I'm getting this echo. Last night I listened to the Black Leaders Organizing for Change, which wasn't that yours? Wasn't that the full set that I listened to, Dee Dee?
Oh, yes, I shared theirs. We cross-posted. That's what happened. I was like, what?
Okay, well, it was excellent. And there was this incredible, so Jackson from North Carolina, young Black woman, young for me, Black woman there who's doing a lot of organizing on the ground. And one of the examples she gave was just had a lot of lessons in it for me. So the Durham police wanted to increase their police force. They just sort of announced this big budgetary increase to get 72 men, women on the force. And Detra and her organizing group were like, well, wait, whoa, wait up. How about we take that same money and we get 72 community safety and wellness people in place. And, she organized like that. And for me, that like whiteness and the white mindset in Durham that would say, more crime, we need, increase the budget, get more police. Like that's the white mindset. It's to do more and more and more of the same, even when it's clearly not working. And what I love and notice about Black women organizers is the way there's an ability to not just know what the root of the problem is, but to know what the workaround is, to work outside of whiteness is the language and the framing I would use that with, to immediately move to creating that more humane world as opposed to doubling down with punitive tactics. So when I think about what's white women's responsibility to Black women in voting, that's why I want to listen to Black women, because I, who grew up in Winchester, Massachusetts, I don't know shit. I don't know how to solve these problems. My mindset is still a white mindset. The best I can do is say, wow, that's a great idea. And I need to follow people like you. I'm less likely to come up with that kind of problem solving approach on my own. So I think that's where a big piece of the responsibility is.
Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate it. Karen, did you want to chime in? The question was what the question is what is white women's responsibility to Black women and non-men?
With what Debbie had to say about this, like to follow the leadership and to vote in support of their ideas. The challenge with white women is we make up such a huge proportion of the electorate. So in 2016, we made up 42% of the electorate. more than white men. White men, only 33% of the electorate. Black and Latinx men and women combined were 20% of the electorate. So even though Black women have the highest participation rates, just their sheer size in the population means that they don't have as much political power as we do. So it's really important that white women align with Black women when we enter the voting booth. But when you go back and look at the analysis too, the history, since 1952, white women have voted, in the majority of us have voted for the Democratic presidential candidate twice. That was for LBJ and for Bill Clinton. In every other election, we've gone in the majority for the Republican candidates.
This is what I really don't like about, hold on one second. Geez, you ordered Chinese food 50 minutes ago because you want to support and just now arrives. Thanks. So what I wanted to say was I wanted to know, what is it about the question? I want to know the root into etymology. Why is the question, why do you make everything about race when it's clear that we're talking about a pattern of behavior amongst white women and the pattern of not listening to Black women and non-men?
Because, well, I'll speak for myself as opposed to all white women. I was taught that Black and brown people of any gender were inferior. And so if I still believed that, why would I follow the lead of that person? And that training is so deep, and no one ever said those words to me. It's
just, you're saying that this was the general consensus. You grew up in Winchester, Massachusetts, which is, it's just really, even now, I sometimes drive through and it's so expansive. Like y'all's lawns is like the size of one project building,
Mm-hmm.
And so you're saying that you grew up, and although it wasn't said because your parents were probably very nice people, you grew up with this mindset that it was like, oh, those people, right?
Well, and very charitable. Oh my gosh, need to help and fix these poor people who can't seem to help and fix themselves. So, this whole white savior. And, though I'm sharing my personal story here and only speaking from my perspective, I can tell you that I do this, I talk about my story all over the country to groups of hundreds of people at a time. And many, many, many people coast to coast, age 20 to 90, if they're white, they resonate. They also were brought up with the idea that the playing field is level. And, if you're taught that that all you have to do is work hard and reach the American dream, and you notice all around you that white people are thriving and Black and brown people aren't, and you're not supposed to talk about it because it's rude to talk about race. Deep down in my deepest inner workings, I was forming conclusions that the reason, white guys were at the head of every organization and on our dollar bills was because by some biological, it was really a biological explanation. Somehow they were superior, which puts white women, Karen, I don't know if you've, this is something I'm starting to think about, is the role that, what is it about white women where we're not allowed to be on the top? And yet, so are we projecting our own sense of being oppressed onto everybody else? I think that's got to be a piece of it. And
yeah, because I never understood how is it that white women can understand sexism. And I mean, I will never give a pass for not understanding racism because you're Black, but if you can understand sexism and you can understand the Me Too movement, right, and you can understand oppression, if someone else, another group of folks is saying, hey, this is where our oppression shows up, it's like white women are oblivious.
And how much of that is, oh, I found a purpose, I'm gonna go be a feminist. And with this other white trait is, or a trait instilled in us because of white ideologies, that we're individuals. So the whole way, I also notice a lot of times people from Black and brown communities, the collective is the relationship. Whereas for me, I'm just in it for me. So I think that's a piece of it too. And so if you ask your average white woman, do you have a greater sense of connection to the white men in your life or the Black and brown women in your life? Which, by the way, you probably don't have any real relationships. So like that factors in too.
Yes. And we're the one raising Brett Kavanaugh's. We're the one raising, the Covington kids or the kids in
Raise
Georgia.
better white people.
Yes. So if I may, Dee Dee, I want to co-sign what Debbie said. So I grew up in a sundown town. My parents were very open-minded, liberal people. They taught me racism is terrible, Dr. Martin Luther King is wonderful, and the way to not be racist is to be colorblind and treat everybody equally. But because we lived in an all-white community, I never actually saw them do that. Then at school, we're watching these movies designed to discourage us from taking drugs that are basically Black people overdosing on heroin. And as I grow up and start to become aware, well, hey, why is there so much racial inequality? The story I get back, and I'm not sure if this is from my school or it's just kind of in the ether, is well, we used to have terrible racism, but then there was a civil rights movement, and now everything is equal. And some families work hard, and that's why they succeed, and other families choose not to.
Yeah,
and
that's
that's
the
why
whitewashing that all schools are engaging in.
And had I not spent, my whole career basically working on this, I think I would still believe that. I think that's what a lot of my friends are telling their kids today, which is why a lot of my work is around teaching white parents how to talk with our kids about race so that we don't repeat this whole thing. Now, the genesis of how we got here, that's a lot of what I've been doing as I'm writing this book, is really doing the research around the history of white women and also what it was like in England, before they started coming over here. So it's interesting. So, last year we commemorated 1619 when the British slave traders kidnapped and brought the first enslaved people to Jamestown. A few months after that, a boatload of white women, so the settlers at that point were almost entirely men, and they arranged to have a boatload of white women brought from England to Jamestown because they knew that they wanted to create this as an intergenerational enterprise. And they knew they had to marry white women in order to kind of stabilize the community and have kids so that they would have someone to pass this on to. And so they raised the money and they brought the women over, and they had to pay a certain amount in tobacco in order to have a chance at marrying one of them. Now, the women were able to select, I guess they did some kind of like speed dating thing, and the woman got to choose who she married. It wasn't like forced like that. But back in England and in the colonies at that time, when women married, we literally ceased to be a person. We became our husband. So any property that we owned became his property. We couldn't enter into contract. We couldn't obtain an education. We couldn't do anything without his permission. So some colonies recognize divorce, but like if you don't have any property, how are you going to get divorced? You don't have an education. Like you are literally dependent on this relationship. I'm not saying that that we don't have agency, and there were white women who were like, screw this, but they were few and far between because basically your ability to survive was connected to that relationship to a white man. And I think that ideology has repeated itself generationally all the way through to today.
So are you saying that white women have their own set of generational trauma? And like, I guess that begs to my next question, which is, Karen, you're about to release a book. Hold on, I'm gonna mute Debbie and you probably. Hold on one second. You're about to release a book entitled White Women, We Need to Talk, Doing Our Part to End Racism, which is going to be published in 2021. And Debbie, you are the author of Waking Up White. And then there's some amazing story about finding yourself in the idiocracy of whiteness, right? And so there's all of that. But why do white women, like if we say in theory and in praxis to follow Black women, why is it I'm finding more and more that white women only can listen to other white women to awaken them? Like this is the 13th episode podcast, and this is the most attended podcast, right? Why can't white women hear and follow Black women like when we're talking? And so I'll unmute Debbie first, and then I'll unmute you, Karen, if that's okay.
Well, and this totally connects to what Karen is saying. So if white women, if we've inherited a second-class citizenship to our white men, we've had to follow their rules. And one of the big rules is, you know, be a nice girl and don't rock the boat. And if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And so there's been, you know, many of us have grown up in a culture of compliance. And Dee, I just had a complete age 60 brain fart. Can you repeat your question to me?
Yes, I will. I put you on mute while I ask the question. So my question is, why do white women need only white women to awaken them? Why can't white women hear and follow Black women? And then I mentioned that this is the most attended live podcast we've done so far.
Right. Okay. So this whole idea of I was so trained to not be angry, not be sad. We actually, in my house, you know, if you showed any of those emotions, you just had to go up into your room and not come out until you made yourself right. So if I come out of my childhood unable to tolerate my own anger and sadness, I am so ill-equipped to tolerate anybody else's. And also, I've been taught to avoid any kind of conflict, so I don't have any conflict navigation skills. So all I have to do, Dee, is hear you raise your voice. It might be in excitement, it might be in anger, it might be in frustration, and it's going to trigger all these things for me that I don't know how to make sense of. And that's white fragility.
Are you going to tell me that you feel attacked because I said, yeah?
Oh, it would have just been too scary for me, you know, and combine that combine that with the fact that I've been taught that Black people are scary and dangerous, and yet I don't have any real conscious awareness of this. This is all percolating deep inside, and so I get all this cognitive dissonance, all these feelings that I can't explain and I haven't been trained to handle. I haven't been taught to be a critical thinker or to think critically about my own self, and so it just becomes easier to avoid. And so, you know, I think one of the biggest things I do when I work with white people is get people up to speed with tolerating your own discomfort, our own discomfort. Because if we check out every time we feel uncomfortable, we'll never get anywhere. And it's not anything about the person who I'm saying is making me uncomfortable. It's all about me and my lack of capacity.
This is white women shit.
Yeah.
Y'all just really like can't even, right? Like, you know, and so like this is y'all's stuff to unpack. And I think that's the main reason why, it's the main reason why I invited you both on the show, is because we have such a white woman problem. And that's why I entitled the show, Help, There is a Spill in Aisle 6F.
Yeah.
So Karen, do you want to address my question?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of, as I mentioned earlier, so many of us grow up in residential segregation. We don't form these relationships. And I think that there's a reason, Nicole Hannah Brown talks about this, that there's a reason why housing segregation was the last of the civil rights laws to get passed, because it's the most intimate and it's also the one that is most tied to wealth accumulation. And, you know, there's huge resistance to desegregating housing and desegregating schools. So for a while after Brown versus Board of Education, schools did start to integrate. And then starting in about 1988, they stopped and now have become further segregated. So we don't have friendships or close personal relationships from an early age. We grow up seeing all these images in the media and hearing this thing like, oh, you know, they've chosen that lifestyle. And if they would just work hard, they wouldn't have that. And then I had a great interview with Desiree Attaway for my book, and we talked about how white women are terrified of Black women. Like, we are physically afraid of Black women. So if you say anything loud or say anything to us about something that we're doing wrong or whatnot, we're just terrified. And our first instinct is to flee, which I think goes back to the intergenerational trauma sustained through slave ownership and white women's role in slavery. And this is why I believe so strongly we need a truth, reconciliation, and reparations process so we can all metabolize that history and repair the harm that was done and take accountability for it. And I would add on top of this, as a sexual assault survivor myself, that my inability to stand up for myself when I was sexually assaulted has definitely robbed me of my voice in other times when I was in conflict and I felt like someone was harming me. And I like kind of shrunk and I was incapable of speaking out on my own behalf. And I think that sexual assault plays a big role in white women's conflict avoidance. Again, I'm not excusing our behavior. I think it
I
is
have to
terrible.
definitely disagree with that because I'm just gonna like leave this there. I have to disagree with that because Black women and non-men go through in as much physical and sexual violence, and it doesn't get the same treatment that white women get when they, I know that it's underreported still even amongst white women, but y'all are given the benefit of the doubt. Anita Hill was not given the benefit of the doubt, but we look at someone like Christine Blasey Ford and we're like, oh my God. And I was there, you know, you were there at the Kavanaugh hearings and you participated in these like meaningful ways. And also still, I feel like white women love whiteness more than they love each other or Black women, right? And so I just don't want to like promulgate, I'm using Moya's word again. I told them I was going to use that word 4 times this week. I don't want to promulgate any sort of like narrative that says that white women, because of their trauma, their generational trauma, which I do think is a valid point, right? They'll carry lineages of oppression. And to that point, Lucy, who was also on the podcast last week, says, I would recommend to Karen the book written by Stephanie Jones Rogers, They Were Her Property, White Women as Slave Owners in the American South, because white women were not entirely without power and agency. And so that is exactly what I was saying, is that I don't want, I mean, I hear you, and yes, and as a violent sexual assault survivor of myself, I still have found my voice. I have still found fish paths, very uncomfortable settings in which I still have conversations with you and Debbie, and I'm able to care for myself and like remove myself from things. And I also come back because it's the work. And so this is how you follow Black women, right? Like, I'll leave you to that, and I'm gonna unmute Debbie and you, Karen, and mute myself.
Debbie, could I say one thing before you start, or
Yes,
is that okay? So 2 things. Number 1, yes, Stephanie Jones Rogers' book, love that book. I could only read like a few pages at a time because it is so disturbing, because it delves into the whole legal structure behind white women's role in slavery and the fact that we made up 40% of slave owners, that that slave owning families would leave the enslaved people to their daughters and the property to their sons. And then the more enslaved people that a white woman owned, her greater value in the marriage market. And it was once white men were the whole slave economy was very speculative, and so they were getting bankrupted, that they made it so that they could transfer property to their wives. That was when women first got their property rights, but that was totally tied to maintaining slavery. But I totally hear you too, Dee, that like as a sexual assault survivor, you can still find your voice and speak up for yourself. But I would also point to that great book, Lower Ed, by Tessie Cottom. She's a professor of sociology. She used to work as an admissions counselor in for-profit colleges. And her book is about the whole for-profit college and their whole predatory lending scheme that is particularly targeted. They are particularly targeting Black women with their predatory loans. And what she interviews in there a psychologist who advises these for-profit colleges on how to get people to sign these massive student loan packages, even when there's no real track record that folks who've gotten their PhD from these institutions or graduated from these institutions are able to land good jobs from it. And that the profile that they use is that in all likelihood, the woman who will sign the student loan package is a sexual assault survivor. And I was like, damn, it's like so pervasive. I would say across race, that when you've been sexually assaulted, it's harder to stand up for yourself in times when you're in times when people are acting adversely towards you. But I agree with you. In no way does this excuse, or there were plenty of white women who did look at this and say this is completely evil, and we need to extricate ourselves from this, and paid whatever price that they needed to do. And that's what all white women should have done back then.
I think about Treva Lindsay's book. Sorry, I think about Treva Lindsay's book as well. It's called Colored No More, and it talks about reinventing Black womanhood in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to take Debbie off mute. I would even suggest that white women need to reinvent themselves and like just throw the whole white woman away. So Debbie, go ahead.
Well, I think this is where starting to look at intersections is important. So I also am a sexual assault survivor. And I think about, white supremacy damages all of us. I think it also very much damages people who materially seem to be, men at the top of the heap. It damages all of us. That's why we all have work to do. I think what's interesting about the white women, our role, which is almost like a middle child role, is that we're damaged by sexual assault, but we're not so damaged that, or it's not so bad that we fight as hard as we should. And whereas for Black women, and a book I think would be so important for every white woman to read is this one, At the Dark End of the Street, which is really about the story of sexual assault for Black women and how Black women have fought for the rights that all of us have, to the extent we have them. But, did I ever speak up about my sexual assault? No. Did I ever fight back? No. Why is that? Because I could keep on living a comfortable enough life. I wonder if that's part of it. And during the Kavanaugh hearings, I was physically, talk about metabolizing, Karen. I love that word. I was really like, my whole body was shaking. And a bunch of friends of mine who have all been sexually assaulted, some from very young ages, we were calling each other. And yet the conversations I had with white women were not about, and can you imagine what rape has been like for Black and brown women who, haven't had this kind of a choice to fight back, who were used to breed, basically. Black and brown women are not in the conversation when I hear about sexual violence in white women's circles, which is why I think this should be mandatory reading for every white woman. I gave it to both.
What is the name of the book again, Debbie? It's called what?
At the Dark End of the Street.
By Danielle McGuire. Okay.
Yeah, Black Women, Rape, and Resistance, A New History of the Civil Rights Movement from Rosa Parks to the Rise of Black Power. So that's a really good example of how we as women aren't integrated in something as intimate and violent as sexual violence. Yeah, throw the whole white woman away, which, you know, now they're going to be white women hearing who think that this is white woman bashing. I would say for me personally, I don't hate white women. Of course, I am one, so that would be kind of stupid. I hate whiteness. I hate white supremacy. I hate what it does to our humanity. I hate what it does to our relationships. I hate what it does to our earth. And so when I'm talking about throw the white woman away, I'm talking about figure out what white supremacy has done to you and then start dismantling it in yourself.
Thank you. I'm unmuting both of you. So I just want to let you know that I did comment because there was an uptick of comments after Karen made some statements. And so I did comment and I let folks know that I will be asking both of you to go through the comments to watch this again. It will be uploaded, and to really sit with the stories that people are saying, and they're uplifting, not just about themselves, because Black women be doing this work, and they are lifting up everyone. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again: a rising tide lifts all ships. I don't care who said it before me; I said it too. My next question is, you know, we talk about white women a lot, and also I do understand the complexity a little bit. I feel like you reached a little bit with that one, Karen, but where are the white men in the conversation on how to be anti-racist?
Where are the white men in the conversation? You know, it's interesting
Because that's who the fuck is oppressing everybody.
I think that in some ways, white men are more open to the conversation because they're less defensive than white women. And you know, white women, we're so wrapped into, well, I'm a good person, and you know, racism is bad, therefore I can't possibly be racist. Whereas I have a lot of white male friends who are like, oh no, you know, like I can be a self-confident white man and still like acknowledge that I have caused harm in a way that a lot of white women I find actually really resistant to. And I talk about this a lot. Like in the workplace, I've suffered sexual harassment and wage gap and glass ceiling, whatever, from white men. But the most harmful behavior that I've experienced in the workplace has come from white women who were senior to me within the organization and perceived me as a threat to their proximity to the white men in power and would do everything that they could to undermine me and to drag me down.
Seems like that's a word, and I think we should hold space for that. Okay, go ahead.
I think that's something that I have found often surprises Black and brown women and men, is how vicious white women are to one another. So, and just in case people don't know that, like what Karen just described is so real, in the workplace, in the neighborhood, on the PTO. You know, it's just.
I was PTO president. Y'all are vicious. Y'all are fucking vicious.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, in addition, you know, like I feel like Karen just made a salient point about the viciousness of white women, and how like y'all still, even this day, clamor for your proximity to white men, right? And so something I wonder about, and it was actually posited in the comments, is that both of you describe yourselves as white women. And we're talking about whiteness. And so how do we separate the two? Because a lot of times they appear as the same. But how do we separate the two? Because I feel like I have two white women who I consider Debbie actually a really good friend of mine, and Karen, I'm getting to know you. And actually, you told me a story about how we actually knew each other twice now, and I'm just like, I don't know, sometimes y'all all look alike. So there is that, right? I'm fucking with you, but I'm not. And so there's that. But I'm wondering, what would it take to separate yourselves from whiteness? Like, would it be possible as part of a change behavior for white women to be like, I don't want to be addressed as white anymore? I don't know what y'all could do. I don't like what steps, maybe that'll be a question.
Yes.
What steps can white women take to dismantle their whiteness? Because like you said, you know, this is why white women be up in my pantsuit nation, and like I literally asked them to share something and they have 1,800 comments and like 3 shares. And this is the problem when you say, well, we do follow Black women, but you didn't even share to ask you to share, right? So what does it look like to dismantle whiteness?
Oh, you go first.
Yeah, well, this is my absolute favorite thing in the world to think about and do and talk about. So I have personally found 35 ways that whiteness lives in me. And
Can we hear 10?
Yeah, I want to go to my list, but I can probably do it off the top of my head. I have a sense of urgency about everything. Perfection, a sense of thinking only for myself and my immediate family. Always thinking in terms of hierarchy. Tendency to blame instead of consider my own role. My comfort is more important than your comfort.
Vicious.
What was that?
I said just vicious. My comfort is more important than your own comfort. Go ahead.
So for each one of these, I've developed an behavior that I'm really trying to develop. And in this question is, why can't I bring them out in the world and be that full, person who sort of my most humane version of myself? Why can't I be that person all the time? So, and actually this next book I'm writing, I haven't told anybody this. I'm going to say it here. Working title.
What? Trust the Black women. Go ahead, Debbie.
Working title is Whiteness Doesn't Love You. And it's about the 35 ways that whiteness lives in me. And when I say love, I think about love as, being something that expands you, that grows you, that connects you. And whiteness is a fear-based set of attitudes and behaviors that are designed to hold in place the status quo. And yes, so for me, it's really, I am so alarmed sometimes by how deeply ingrained these white attitudes and behaviors are. And yet that's getting alarmed doesn't do me any good. So noticing them, being conscious, increasingly conscious of them, and, different contexts will trigger different, each of those 35 things to different degrees. What's wonderful in my household is that my husband, he is a white man who is, working hard on this too and speaking up about it as well. We notice it in each other. We call each other on it all the time. And so I now have.
I would love to be the paint chips on the walls in that house.
Yeah. Was that white Debbie talking? Or was that awakened Debbie talking? What did you just say? Yeah. So it's a process. And yet nobody can begin on this process if there's a denial, like whiteness, that's not a thing. Me, no racist bone in my body. So that kind of self-work is only accessible once we recognize the degree to which whiteness has been done to us and we've ingested it. And it has become our habitualized way of engaging in the world.
Karen, thank you, Debbie, before you answer, have y'all forgone, because I didn't hear this on your list, have y'all forgone white fragility in your work? Like, I feel like the conversations y'all have been around, and if Karen, if you and I remember each other now, like we have the conversation, I think about how, if it's okay, I'll just briefly share the story. You were on a flyer, and I think there was a Black woman who had an issue with the fact, and Debbie, I'm going to mute you, there was a Black woman who had an issue with the fact that you were running an anti-racist workshop. And there was a Black woman who slid on the post and she was like, she's not running the workshop. She is collecting money for me. I am the woman. That is my name. That is my business. If you want to look it up, that, you know, and it became like this very weird thing, which I know you couldn't comment on, but like white women do the spectator thing, right? And I was like, it's so weird, like how I've run into you twice on these internet streets and didn't realize until just today when we spoke that it was you both times. So something else that I want to delve into as we start talking about whiteness and how to deconstruct it, right, is also what does it take to grow emotional resilience and capacity in this work so we don't leave the work, right? Because white women leave. I have the hugest problem with there's 700 white women mostly in my group, and I can't get them to stay committed to doing anything. And I know that there's quality over quantity, all that shit, but I get tired, and I think I can speak for most Black femmes, right? So what does it take to grow emotional resilience and capacity in this work so we don't project our shit onto other people? And how can we deconstruct whiteness? Because I wonder, have y'all gotten to a point where your fragility has kind of like leveled up a little bit and the white tears aren't so prevalent?
Yes, I would say I am pretty dang resilient, and I can't recall the last time that well, in general, I don't cry very often, except for when I'm watching This Is Us. For some reason, that triggers like very, it's so weird how like these certain shows will evoke so much emotion when I don't feel that strong of an emotion, kind of in my daily life. But yeah, I mean, it takes a lot for me to kind of have a breakdown and want to retreat. It does still happen, and I have done things in public. I was on a panel last year around this time at the Wing in San Francisco, and it was like a fishbowl. So there was a panel on closing the empathy gap for women of color, and it was in the room was half women of color, half white women, and I was the only white woman on the panel, and there was an empty seat, so people could come up from the audience and sit in the seat, and of course it was woman after woman of color after woman of color, and then finally a white woman got up and sat down. And I kind of like leaned to her and like touched her arm. And a Black woman on the panel was like, what you just did was racist. What you just did was coddle that white woman. Why was it so hard for her to get up here in front of everybody that you had to like give her this little pat? And I mean, oh my God, I turned like bright red. I was so mortified. I'm like, thank you. But inside, I was kind of dying a little bit, and it took me
That's
a while.
why I hate when
process
white women say colored, because I'm like, y'all turn more colors than everybody else.
Yes, and so I would, and then I studied a little bit more about like the adultification bias and like the infantilization of white women and this tendency to do that to white women, and realized, like Debbie, this lives inside of me, this sense that, oh, this weak little white woman, I need to like coddle her for getting up here and saying this in front of everybody. So I just say that to say it's kind of an ongoing process, but something that like, when someone brings it to my attention, my response is thank you for pointing that out, because we all have things that we're doing that we're not aware of, and we're all just learning and constantly making mistakes. And
are you telling me that when a Black woman or several Black women corrected you, you said thank you?
That's what I said. Yeah.
And am I under the impression that I feel like not even that, I feel like I want this to set a precedent for white women everywhere. Say thank you, say your reparations, and keep it moving. Because what happens a lot of times is when white women get called out, it seems like white women can't handle it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, even though we're equitable peoples, right? It goes to the point of white women perpetrating that, how dare you? And I don't think it's just because I'm a nice person, right? It's you still, as an adult, right, who's grown up with that generational trauma, you still look at Black people, period, as inferior. Like, that's not what was happening. And like, we know the slogan and the hashtag is, you okay, sis, follow Black, you know, Me Too was co-opted by white women, like, you know, and we know these things. And yet when Black women speak in a corrective tone, this is the first time I've heard of a white woman saying thank you. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you. And please, please, white women, just say thank you. Like, just acknowledge that you've done harm and take accountability for it. No one is, I mean, come on, who is perfect? This is the thing. White women are like, I'm not going to do anything anti-racist until I can do it perfectly, because I'm so mortified that I'm going to be called out and dragged or whatnot. So I'd rather not do it at all than to have that experience. Jesus, I mean, okay, we are causing tremendous harm. And if we can just get out of our comfort zone a little bit, and yes, we are going to fuck up, but withstand that, that's how we're going to get better. That is how we are going to learn. You did not learn how to drive a car overnight. You did not get your bachelor's degree in a day. You know what I'm saying? Like, everything takes time, and you're going to screw up and make 18 million mistakes along the way. That is how you will grow. But if you never even try, we're just going to remain locked in this disaster. And we can't, I mean, we're all going to die. Like, we have to change now, please, white women. And it's okay. You will survive. You will be fine.
Because Karen, we're looking at you thriving after them drags.
This is what we need. We need more white women role models of what this looks like. You know, who do we have? Who is a household name white woman out there?
No one. I asked this question. That's how I came across y'all. So I asked this question on my Facebook. I was like, I thought white women were supposed to be doing the work, right? And I was like, can y'all please point me in the direction of a white woman anti-racist educator? Because I feel like everyone should be anti-racist, including those of us who can't participate in racism. I still think that we should have that lens, because not enough of us do. But majority, the work is supposed to be on white folks, right? And so when I asked the question, everyone commented, they don't even follow white people anymore. I was like, this is a lie. This is a lie more than 10 times, because both of these women have books and they have, you know, and so the question is, you know, I had definitely, when I asked you both to speak, I was like, you know, I am the type of person that if I'm having white women do anything, like Debbie and I have worked together, and Debbie, both times we've worked together, has donated the entire proceeds either to the organization I was working with, or we split it in half where it went to the YWCA and then the other half went to our org, or anything like that. And so I think about that time, you know, Karen, that everybody was like, and how dare you? Like, and you were like, well, all the proceeds from this class go to this Black woman. So tonight, you will see that the pinned post, I see all the white women joining. Don't see any white women liking the pinned comment. Sorry. It lists all the payment links for Black women and non-men who are here, and I would want them to engage in that way. But the question is how much, you and I talked about this, and Debbie knows how I feel. I hate the money conversation, because I feel like white women do this thing. When Black femmes ask for money or say, this is what we've got going on, the conversation is like, they're scamming or this, that, and a third. And there's so much competition between Black non-men in the first place to get y'all's attention, you know, that the main thing I hear promulgated from white women is, I mean, I organize locally, right? Or I send reparations to local organizers. And so I think about people like me who are organizing not only on a local level, we're doing books and breakfast, and we're doing so many other things. Even during the pandemic, we'll be delivering meals. It's like, what does that say? What is a slave to the 4th of July? Like, what does that say to Black women who are holding so much space? Like, we say we're not your mules, and we say, you know, pay us for our labor, and then white women say, oh, but I'm already paying another Black woman for their labor, right? What does that look like?
Well, I would ask white women everywhere to wonder with yourself how much of the resistance to just handing over whatever you can whenever you can, how much of that is connected to the old stereotype that Black women are, you know, sitting around collecting welfare checks. There's a lot in the ether about that's what Black women do. And if you really don't know how much on the ground work Black women are doing, that's a gap. That's a connection that needs to be made. And also, you know, it's also relative. You know, a lot of white women, well, I'll speak for myself. So I grew up upper class. So this is a whole, like, I just have a different thing about giving money. But a lot of people like do it by budget, which is so that had to go out the window. It's just like, I know as a person with white and class and sexual orientation and Anglo, all this privilege, that I will continue to be okay. I will be able to get that next job. I will, you know, I will not be pulled over for a broken taillight and put in jail and not to be able to earn a living and help support my family. There's so much working for me that once I started to understand that, I could give more away. And it feels so good. It feels so good to help somebody who, I mean, Dee Dee, the work you're doing is work I simply couldn't do. Like, I don't know the people you know. I don't work on the ground like that. I don't know the ground the way you do. So if what I can do is leverage my privilege materially and other connection wise, then that feels good. You ask what keeps people in the movement.
Wait, we lost you, Debbie. What keeps people in the movement?
I think feeling
Debbie?
Good. Feeling like you're can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can hear you. So you said that doing on the ground work, and I don't know what else the fuck I do that makes people feel good. I'm not here to make white women feel amazing, but are you saying that, like, seeing the fruit of my labor?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it makes me feel good to know that I can support you, because what I have, you don't have, and what you do, I can't do. And so it's a way for us to build a web movement. And the other thing that I may have gotten cut out on is, for me, it makes me feel like I'm living in integrity. I'm walking my talk, and that keeps me in. I wonder if people leave because they start to feel like they're not living in integrity, and that internal feeling is so uncomfortable that it's just easier to check out. In the long run, that's not easier, and then you've copped out.
Thank you. I'm gonna mute you, Debbie, and then unmute Karen.
Yeah, I would co-sign with what Debbie said, and just, you know, I can do the kind of outreach work, and sorry, I think that
white people are into, but I don't do that slave role playing shit. What?
What was I? Yeah, so what I am effective at is doing that kind of initial outreach work, and like, hey, pay attention, listen, and develop the resilience to stay in. Okay, but I can never, to Debbie's point, I cannot do what you do, Dee Dee. They need white women need to work with Black and Indigenous women of color anti-racism educators. Where I can help is like giving the initial outreach and saying, hey, this is important, pay attention, we need to do this work, and helping them to develop the resilience to overcome their initial trepidation about working with you. But I also encourage every white woman on here who is benefiting from the emotional and intellectual labor of Black women. We need to pay them for this labor. We cannot do this for free. We can't. Also, please do not go on their pages and like sit there and lurk and never comment because you're too terrified to say anything and just kind of like absorb it all. You know, actually engage, and don't just engage online. Like, form actual relationships. I think that the piece that is so important to me is to actually sit down and develop those friendships and get to know each other as human beings and helping each other out, like not just with cash, but like, you know, I spend a lot of time helping people access employment attorneys or jobs, or nominating them for prizes, or connecting them to my literary agent, or just whatever I can do to connect people to my network. That is what I am here for. And so much of our problem is our socially segregated networks. I used to call them naturally occurring all white social circles, but then I realized, no, actually they're not. They're very intentionally created all white social circles. We just don't realize that they are intentionally created, but they're created by all this racist housing policy and educational policy that keeps us segregated, and then we just maintain, so that the cast of girls is living in Brooklyn and it's all, you know, white women associating with other white people, and there's, you know, there's nothing at all strange about that.
Thank you both. So there are some commentary, and I want to address two things just because I'd rather say it publicly than to not. So there was, I'm going to mute both of you for a second. There was a comment, I guess, from either a friend or a follower of yours who happens to be a Black woman. And this is where we get into the murky conversations, right? So when I said, after all of the draggings that you've experienced, you're sitting okay, I think that maybe your friend was like, no one should be dragging you. And I just want to explain this thing sometimes that white women bank on. Y'all sometimes bank on a Black woman or a person of color validating your value to them as like as a battering ram to other Black women and non-men. And I definitely want to discourage white women from doing that. I can't tell you how many white women think that they are in close proximity to me and won't catch these hands. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so I just wanted to uplift that. And then the other thing I just want to be very clear that, you know, and Debbie and I have talked about this before, that if I'm in conflict with another Black woman, it's never going to be anyone's responsibility who's not Black to just insert themselves into that conversation. We've seen it with so many amazing Black activists, both from the infamous level to the non-infamous, right? Where white women have been like, oh my God, this Black woman said this about her. And you cannot, Black people are not monolithic. And I'm not going to stand for it. So I just wanted to uplift that. I'm calm and I know how to talk to white people voice. But the other thing I wanted to ask was, I'm going to ask both of y'all, because I feel like Debbie has known me for the longest, but you just said it, Karen. What do you think people's, you said trepidations, or I think that was the word you used, about working with me or working with someone like me? What do you think that that's about? I'm going to mute myself.
What do I think it's about? You know, I think middle class white women. So I'm a single mom. I'm a soccer mom. Oh, and this is kind of evoking something I wanted to talk about earlier, is that in order to really do this work, I had to kind of extricate myself from the patriarchy. I mean, I live with my 83-year-old mom. I have my kids here 50% of the time. I had to leave my marriage. Like, there's no way I could have done this work had I remained in this patriarchal relationship. I had to like get out of it as far as I could in order to do it. And so this isn't really speaking to the trepidation piece, but like a lot of when I'm trying to encourage women like me to go down this path, they're like they're consumed with other kinds of worries. Like a lot of them are struggling in marriages that are extremely unhappy. A lot of them have a lot of credit card debt, and they're trying to raise their kids and kind of live a middle class life that's increasingly hard for them to do. And so when I'm like, okay, we come with me this weekend and let's do a retreat, or do a weekend workshop with someone, I can't convince them that this is a good use of their time. They're so consumed with their own worries and their own mishigas that like to take on top of it, oh, I want to now take on my role in racism and really spend a weekend really contemplating what that is and deconstructing my whiteness. They're like, there's just no appetite for them to do that. And this is why I think trying to target our efforts, particularly at millennial white women before they get married. And also millennial white women did not vote for Trump in the majority. They were crying during the Kavanaugh confirmation. I know there's a lot of problematic behavior among millennial white women influencers on social media, and I'm not trying to say millennial white women are like good white women, but I'm just saying that like once white women have bought into the patriarchy to a certain degree and are married and have kids and everything, getting them to change their viewpoint on this stuff, I don't know. It's hard to do. Where I do think that they will listen to some degree is around how do you talk to your kids about this, and how do you make sure that your kids don't turn into racist TikTok video makers.
Oh, they're always going to do that. So I would encourage both of y'all to have other white women push past that trepidation, because I'm not that bad and I don't bite. And
woman, 100%.
No hugs, please. No hugs, no hugs, no pictures, no hugs. And so like I would ask Debbie to like, you knowing the work that I did in Cambridge and like also knowing me now, like I don't know why we're connected the way that we are, but I wish that more white people would unpack, like I'm not going to put you on a pedestal, and I wish that more white people would unpack the way I've seen you do it.
Well, I've been pushed hard to do that by women of color. This is why the relationship piece is so important. When you talk about like Karen's story about giving a gentle little rub to the white woman next to her and being called out on it, that could so easily be me. And what I would say to white women is there is this total turning point when you learn that when a person of color gives you feedback about how you've just enacted whiteness, the way to respond is to say thank you. And for me, I always add, I'm really going to think about this hard, because it's not like that's the first time you've ever offended a person of color. It's just the first time someone's ever given you the gift of the truth. And so that helping people understand that it's whether or not you do the work, you're still getting yourself in trouble. You're not like going under people's radar. So get in the work. And what I would say has been mind-blowing for me is that once I started to understand, again, for me, it's been helpful to understand that whiteness was done to me, that it damaged me as a human being, that it made me afraid of conflict. It made me afraid of my own big feelings. Once I started to unpack it, there's something in that for me selfishly. And I could see results really quickly. like I could see my marriage getting better. I could see my my parenting ability getting better. I could see the kinds of conversations I was willing to start in my more extended family getting better, not just around race, around everything. So for me, it's really a process of reclaiming my humanity, and so that's a serious selfish reason to do it. And I will say that, like, I'm not done. I'll never be done. I have those moments where Karen described where she said thank you, but she was dying a little bit inside. Like, those moments are still so gut wrenchingly for me. And the exact same set of tapes about you fuck up and, oh my God, no one's ever going to like page again. You're a total fraud. Like, starting to hear those tapes inside, the same tapes run. I just get more familiar with them and less reactive to them. And I don't want to be in an all white world. Who wants to be in an all white world?
You know what I think is actually a really effective teaching tool is the Hulu series that just ended, Little Fires Everywhere. I highly encourage everyone to watch it. It's outstanding. And it really, really shows the conflict between Black women, uh, Asian American women, and white women. And I think it does a really good job of dramatizing for white women the harm that whiteness does to us, and the harm that the patriarchy does to us, and how deep-seated what we find the most threatening about Black women is our intense jealousy of their freedom and of their agency and of their power, and what in our deep, like, denial of our own power, right? So because we're shrouded in privilege and kind of coddled, and if we start crying, the whole world stops and everything. But we think that all of our power is dependent on our relationship to whiteness and dependent on our relationship to white men, and sort of performing white womanhood the way that the patriarchy likes it. And there's this deep psychology around that. But in actuality, we could just say, fuck it, I'm out, and have a totally different life. Now, are we going to have to sacrifice some of our material comfort in order to do so? Yes. Are we going to have relationships that may end, or things like that? Yes. But what we will gain is so much greater than what we lose. And I just want to encourage as many white women, especially now, like during this time when I can only imagine, like, if you're in an unhappy marriage, like living through this social distancing and quarantine, all of that, I really urge people to think, you have one life to live. How are you going to live it? Are you going to like sell out and just be like, for the material comfort of staying in this marriage or whatnot, I'm going to keep doing it? Or am I going to walk away and form a totally different way of living with this one life that I have to live? And I would encourage you to do that. It takes a lot of, discomfort and fear and all of that, but we all have agency. We all get to write our own story. We don't have to follow the pattern of our mothers. And that's exactly how we're in this screwed up situation. How is it that, I just, every time I think about it, like, how is this possible that 53% of us voted for a pussy grabber in chief? Like, what is that about? How could we want so little for ourselves? And so we have the opportunity to walk away. And when we do, look at Dee Dee. Like, there's all these incredible women on the other side who want us to come over, and yeah, they're going to hold us accountable, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and we're going to have to unlearn a lot of stuff, and it's going to be hard. Okay. But what we will gain is so much greater than what we lost, including our integrity, including the opportunity to really be joyful and true. So anyway, sorry, that was kind of a long soliloquy. I apologize.
That was a plea,
my kids
just
are
to
getting
say white women are miserable and y'all need to get y'all shit together in order to be happy and stop oppressing Black women, Indigenous folks, queer folks, and non-men. Jeez please, crackers and cheese. So we are at the end of our webinar, and I always ask a question to both of my to all of my guests. And the question that I will be asking is a two-pronged question. The first part of it is there a question? We have about 7 minutes. Is there a question or a topic that you were surprised I did not ask you? And the second prong of that is who would you like to see on the show? And can you use your privilege to help me get that done?
Is there a question or topic? God, I don't know. I mean, I personally thought that this would be more combative and more that I would be dragged on here. So I'm not gonna lie. I was like,
I know because it was your friend who's in my comment section, and I you better talk to your homegirl. This is my house. Wipe your feet, ma'am.
No, and listen. It's okay to drag me. Like, I'm resilient. I will, you know what I mean? Like, please give me the feedback. My whole thing is about being accountable, and I'm not like I make. Please, I just want to get better. So if you're not hurting my feelings, if you drag me, and I want to hear your feedback, even when it's really harsh and difficult for me to listen to. I'm going to listen to it. I guess that's what I was surprised that it wasn't like. And as far as who would be a great person to get on here, you know who I really love? Like, if you were going to do another show with two white women who I would love for you to have on here are Megan Rapinoe and Bob Bland, because I think they're really amazing examples of white women role models who are getting this right. And I think they both have really, it would elevate your platform, and it would engage a lot of white women who are probably not as tuned into you as the ones who currently are.
Well, I appreciate that sentiment, and I would push back and say that Bob Bland in the beginning was not my fan, and actually kind of like the whole Women's March wrote against a lot of the topics I talked about in Befriending Becky and defended the Women's March. And I have held Bob Bland accountable in person on several occasions. And most recently, I think I asked her to share something. And she was just like, I can't contribute financially until I get my own personal life together. And so this, for me, goes back to the conversation of what white women are willing, especially with all that privilege and power. No one white woman should have all that power. Should have been the song that Kanye sang, but whatever. But when we talk about privilege and power, I would definitely be willing to sit with Bob off camera first, because we need to have a real ass conversation in which I will not get banned from Facebook, and she needs to sit with that uncomfortability. And then I would be open to having a conversation in front of my followers so she doesn't embarrass herself. Yes. Debbie?
Well, actually, the first person who popped to mind is Norma Johnson, who is a poet. She is a Black woman who lives in Boulder, Colorado. She's lived in many places. She's been in Boulder for the last decade or so, I think. And she has written a series of poems for my white friends. And her poetry is so good. And she is such a calm, deep thinker. I think she really understands white people. And, and she says, Boulder is just...
it's extremely white.
Extremely white, a lot of trust fund babies. And, she's been through a lot out there trying to figure out how to navigate it. And, she's one of my favorite people. I think her poetry is breathtaking. They're long, like, one of her poems is I Didn't Tell You. It's a 7-minute poem about all the things that she hasn't told white people. This is to that point, like, just because someone points out something to you, don't think that's your first time you fucked up. She's brilliant. And yes, I could put you in touch with her if that sounded interesting. You can go online, Dee, and her I Didn't Tell You poem is on YouTube. Norma.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to unmute both of you and just say, Debbie, were you surprised that did I miss something? I know I didn't.
No, I just can't. What was that?
I said, I know I didn't.
No, I mean, we sort of had an idea what we were going to talk about, but I was, here's one way I've divested myself from whiteness. I'm totally, I'll just go with the flow. I don't need an agenda. I don't come in with a lot of expectations.
All right. So I just want to say thank you to both of you for appearing on this episode of The Full Set. I had this episode because there is a serious white woman problem, and I hope that you both continue to interrogate yourselves and examine the way that not only does the white woman problem show up for both of you, but also for the many others who are supposed to be digging into the work and reading your books and this, that, and the third, aren't really taking that opportunity. So with that, I will say goodnight to you both. Thank you very much for appearing on the show. And I had a good time. So I hope y'all have a good night.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Thank you, Debbie. It's an honor.
Thank you,
As
Dee
I said,
Dee. Thanks.
I felt, I told Dee Dee when she invited me, I'm like, I feel like Jimi Hendrix is inviting me to get on stage.
Oh.
But this is such an honor, and it was a fantastic conversation, and I would love to do it again. And thank you for everything you do, Dee Dee. I mean, this is so much work to put this whole series together. So if you're out there and you're watching this, please give to Dee Dee. She needs our support.
She did not ask you to say that, did she?
No, you did not ask me to say that in exchange for not dragging me on the show.
Because I got some gems to drag you with.
This is bringing from my heart, and we need more conversations like this. You know, I feel like we get siloed, right? So there's like
bring me to San Francisco so I could break that shit wide the fuck open.
Yes, we need you here in San Francisco. Oh my goodness, don't even get me started.
I'm on coronavirus.
Exactly.
Thanks for this series. I look forward to listening to a lot of them. Yeah, it's really great. Thank you so much. And Karen, it's been great getting to know you a little bit.
Yeah, definitely, Debbie.
And I just want to also say thank you to all the Black viewers who I did not put a trigger warning on this for, because racism is our everyday default in which we live in. And I'm really hoping that we can move forward in a world in which we actually want to live and desire to live in, and that means it's gonna take all of us. But mostly, y'all just gotta get y'all shit together. Have a great day, y'all. Have a great day.